Hello, I am Mindaugas Ramoska, and this is Ekspertai.eu, Lithuania, and we're gonna do interview today. And at the beginning, I will read some quotes. So Lithuania states that Ukraine is currently fighting not only for its own freedom and independence, but also for freedom and independence of entire civilized and democratic world, including the US. Lithuanian political leaders have repeatedly informed Lithuanian people that we are satisfied only with victory on the front line on Ukrainian territory and that Ukraine's borders must be restored to what they were in 1991. Lithuania has repeatedly indicated that after victory on the front line, Russia will have to pay reparations to Ukraine and that Russian President Vladimir Putin will have to be tried in the Hague Tribunal, and also at the tribunal initiated by Lithuanian leaders specifically for Putin. Lithuania has shown global leadership for years in actively helping to rebuild Ukraine, providing billions of dollars in financial support, a percentage of GDP, as well as military and other necessary assistance. I would like to point out that Ukraine's invitation to join NATO and victory over Russia is strategic goal of Lithuania without any compromises that we hear on Lithuanian media outlets daily. So I would like to introduce our special guest, William Scott Ritter, former United Nations weapons inspector, author, commentator, and true American patriot. Hello, Scott.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for having me.
So you heard a little bit what I just read, and maybe a few thoughts. What you think about this? What Lithuanian people hear almost every single day in Lithuanian media.
Look, Lithuania is a sovereign state, and as a sovereign state, Lithuania has a right to formulate its own foreign policy and set its own national security priorities. I will say that it usually is sound practice to ensure that your foreign policy and your national security priorities conform to reality, or otherwise you'll find yourself disappointed. And if you take too extreme of a position, failure to accomplish these goals and objectives could actually have a detrimental impact on the very security you're trying to preserve. I would say that in the case of Ukraine, in the case of Russia, Lithuania's foreign policy objectives are to the detriment of Lithuania's national security. It is clear at this juncture that the gambit of Lithuania, together with its NATO partners, to use the conflict in Ukraine as a mechanism of achieving the strategic defeat of Russia has failed, and has failed egregiously. And Lithuania is in danger of finding itself completely out of touch with reality, seeking to pursue policy objectives that are not only unattainable, but if Lithuania continues to pursue them, may find Lithuania in a very precarious situation economically, politically, and militarily.
Thank you. Thank you for your opinion on this question, on these things. And maybe let's go to some topics that we can discuss further. So German Brigade and Lithuanian Constitution. You already spoke about German Brigade before. So your speech was translated into Lithuanian language for Lithuanian people to understand better what's going on. So because on the news, it's really different story, what you're saying and how they're telling us, how it's going to be helpful and how we're going to be strong and how it's going to be really, really good stuff to have a German brigade here. But thing is that Lithuanian Constitution, Article 137 says that there may not be any weapons of mass destruction or foreign military bases on territory of Republic of Lithuania. May I add that I think translation is not really should be not allowed to be weapons of mass destruction, because maybe it's not perhaps right word, but maybe I'm wrong in this. So, former Minister of National Defense Laurynas Kasčiūnas said, the use of the military territories and facilities of the Republic of Lithuania by the German Brigade, Lithuania will be subject to the concept of the Republic of Lithuania. Respecting the sovereignty of the Republic of Lithuania and the requirements of law, the Rudininkai training ground, where the majority of German brigade will serve, is not a military base of another country, but a military territory of Republic of Lithuania, which will be used by the troops of German Brigade and Lithuanian Armed Forces, as well as by troops of other NATO allies. So, will the deployed German brigade become a foreign base, or it's Lithuanian one? It's kind of a question here.
Again, I re-emphasize that Lithuania is a sovereign state responsible for its own laws, interpretation of those laws. I think that the issue of having German soldiers based on Lithuanian soil is an issue of diplomacy between Lithuania and Germany to define the status of those forces and what, and how Lithuania chooses to do that, what terms become acceptable between Lithuania and Germany, or the business of Lithuania and Germany. If the Lithuanian people believe that the Lithuanian government is not adhering to the intent of the law and allows German forces on Lithuanian soil in a manner which is inconsistent with the Constitution, then I would imagine that's an issue between the Lithuanian people and the Lithuanian government to be resolved at the next election. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have a right or am even in a position to define how Lithuania should interpret its own laws. What I can say is this. If you think that a brigade of German troops on Lithuanian soil somehow protects you, you're wrong. If anything, the conflict in Ukraine shows that the reality of high-intensity conflict of the sort that would be expected to occur in any case where Russian forces met with NATO forces, and the last time I checked, Lithuania is a member of NATO, and so is Germany. The level of violence that would come from this, the level of death and destruction, would mean that a German brigade would have a life expectancy of less than 5 days. And unless there is a mechanism in place for Germany to rapidly reinforce this brigade with additional brigades, that would have to include prepositioned forces, dedicated earmarked forces, mechanisms of transfer, appropriate, logistical support, ammunition stockpiles, etc., none of which exist. Lithuania is just fooling itself. And the problem with this self-deception, this self-delusion, is that Lithuania may be operating from a perception of security where no such security exists, and get itself involved in a crisis with Russia that could lean towards a military solution. And if that's the case, then Lithuania will cease to exist. I think Lithuania needs to understand that it should not be in the business of promoting conflict with Russia. Russia's not in the business of promoting conflict with Lithuania. But if there is a conflict, rest be assured, only one nation will be destroyed, and that will be Lithuania, together with the other Baltic nations and any other NATO member that seeks to acquire. Ask yourself, what is the reinforcement schedule of NATO troops to Lithuania? Compare and contrast that reinforcement schedule, if one exists, with the expected anticipated rated advance of the Russian army. And the answer is that Russia will have occupied all of Lithuania before any NATO troops could arrive to rescue Lithuania. And the German forces that will be stationed in Lithuania will die in Lithuania. This is the reality. Now, if Lithuania wants to spend money on having German forces based on, that's its business. And if Germany wants to sacrifice a brigade of soldiers by dispatching to Lithuania, that's its business. I would advise that Lithuania would be better served by focusing on how to peacefully coexist with Russia and not promoting conflict both in Ukraine and potentially in Lithuania.
Yeah, you're very right, especially that Russia is our neighbor. I mean, Kaliningrad Oblast is our neighbor, and on other side is Belarus. So like you having two, we call it countries aggressors. I mean, so it's like small tiny country in between of two big. I mean, Belarus not so big, but Russia is like huge countries, and we're escalating this like really really big time. So okay, so maybe we continue, and the next one is commander of Lithuanian Armed Forces Romualdas Vaikšnoras and the need to fight against Russia. So Romualdas Vaikšnoras, commander of the Lithuanian Armed Forces, speaking on behalf of the entire military alliance, said, "Now we want to fight our war against an equal adversary, and Russia is that adversary." So the question is, does such a speech by Lithuanian military commander indicate that the readiness of all NATO to fight against Russia, including USA? Yeah, that's the question.
Well, let's look at it from two perspectives. One, the state of the Lithuanian military, because again, I emphasize that if there were to be a conflict between NATO and Russia, Lithuania would be destroyed in the first week. The Lithuanian army is not the equal of the Russian army. It's not anywhere close to being the equal of the Russian army. Even with a German brigade propping it up, the Lithuanian army would be defeated handily in short order. So I don't know why the commander of the Lithuanian Armed Forces believes that Lithuania can somehow prevail in a larger NATO-Russian conflict. It would be the end of Lithuania, and every Lithuanian citizen needs to understand that Lithuania would cease to exist as a modern nation state, and the level of casualties that would be incurred on Lithuania, both in terms of its military and its civilian population, would be catastrophic. But now let's talk about the other reality. NATO doesn't exist without the United States. I'll say that one more time, just because in case Lithuanians are confused by the fact that they're inviting Germans back to Lithuanian soil. And I want to emphasize that. As an American, the idea of German forces stationed on Lithuanian soil is abhorrent, because I do remember the last time there were German forces on Lithuanian soil, and that was in a war where my ancestors fought to kill Nazis and liberate Europe from the Nazi scourge. Now, if Lithuania wants to identify with its Nazi heritage, and I will emphasize this again, Lithuania has a Nazi heritage, fighting alongside Nazi Germans, providing significant manpower both for Waffen-SS armed formations, but also paramilitaries that participated in the active murder of Jews throughout Europe. That is Lithuania's history. I haven't forgotten it. Russia hasn't forgotten it. And Lithuania should never forget it. Not because the Lithuanians today are guilty of any such crimes, but Lithuanians today must be aware of their heritage and understand that which they do reflects on them. And when they re-embrace a past history with Germany, they're digging up graves that should perhaps, bodies that should be left buried. I'm not too happy about this, and I don't think too many Americans, upon reflection, are. But the fact of the matter is, Lithuania and NATO doesn't exist without the United States, and we are not going to commit suicide because some Lithuanian general decided to let his mouth run off and write checks that the NATO body can't cash. NATO is not prepared for war. I'll emphasize that one more time. NATO is not prepared for war. There are no competent military formations in NATO besides the United States military. Germany has taken how long to get a single brigade organized and prepared to be sent to Lithuania? One brigade, 5,000 troops, and it takes them years to do this. And yet you want to engage in a conflict of global scale with Russia, a nuclear armed power. The United States isn't going to do this. And without the United States, NATO is nothing. I'll say that again. Without the United States, NATO is nothing. So my advice to this Lithuanian general is just to sit down and shut up. Stick to the business of defending Lithuania against any potential threat, including Russia. You have every right to prepare for self-defense against Russia. But once one recognizes that there is no legitimate defense against Russia because Russia is far too big, that perhaps the best course of action is not to kick the bear, but rather find a way to live in peace with the bear. That doesn't mean appeasing the bear, Lithuania is a sovereign state. It can be a member of the European Union. It can be a member of NATO. Russia could care less. But find a way to live in peace with your neighbor. That's the best course of action. And allowing this general to talk the language of war when Lithuania is in no position to survive such a war is irresponsible in the extreme.
Yeah, you're very right. Because as you mentioned, Second World War, and Lithuania already demolished monuments of Soviet soldiers in capital Vilnius. So they're like doing some like aggressive moves towards Russia or against Russia, just to make things worse and worse. So it's not nice from, let's say, our side to escalate these things, because for example, in Germany they're not demolishing any monuments in for example Slovakia or Hungary or other countries, but Latvia, Lithuania are doing this. So it's not really nice things to do to your neighbor. It's our history. It was long time ago. So just keep it, have it, remember it, and respect it. That's it. It's so Soviet Union with Americans, British and French, they fought against Nazi Germany, and we won. So we should keep these monuments as the history, and to remind ourselves what can happen, in the future if you don't respect that.
No, I agree. It's very important to remember the history. It's very important to remember one's history.
Thank you. So let's move to another one, and Lithuanian withdrawal from arms control treaties. So Lithuania has officially withdrawn from the 2008 Convention on Cluster Munition, as well as considering withdrawal from Ottawa Convention banning anti-personnel mines. So what more should Lithuania to do ensure victory in battlefield with Russia? It's like strange question, but it's sometimes we don't know what to expect from our government and what they're doing.
Well, first of all, as an American, woe be it for me to criticize Lithuania for withdrawing from treaties that the United States is not a party to. So I can't be critical of Lithuania for saying they wish to use cluster munitions or anti-personnel mines when my country uses cluster munitions and anti-personnel mines. These are decisions of legitimate national defense. And if the Lithuanian military professionals believe that their force would be a more lethal force by employing these weapons, and they're not concerned about the signal that sends to Lithuania's non-American allies, again, Lithuania is a sovereign state. It has a right to make these decisions. You're talking to a former Marine here who has trained and used cluster munitions and air-dispensed anti-personnel mines in combat. It's a weapon of war, and my job when I'm in the military is to kill or disable my enemy, to achieve military victory by facilitating the enemy's defeat. And usually that means by killing the enemy. And I don't believe that you kill the enemy softly. I believe you kill the enemy hard. And I believe in using whatever legal weapon is available, use it to its most lethal effectiveness. So who am I to tell the Lithuanian army you can't use cluster munitions or submunitions or anti-personnel mines? But again, I come back to the following. Do I really want to be training as a prize fighter when I'm a lightweight and all my potential opponents are heavyweights, knowing that the first round, the first punch, I would be knocked out? Or would I, as a lightweight, seek to say that maybe the best thing to do is engage in intellectual discourse about chess or change the nature of the game? Lithuania should not be in the business of trying to fight wars. That is not Lithuania's strength. I don't care how many cluster munitions you have. I don't care how many anti-personnel mines you have. There's not enough, and you're going to lose. And it's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of effort. What Lithuania should be emphasizing is diplomacy. They should be emphasizing economic discourse, interaction. They should be emphasizing cultural exchanges to develop deeper cultural understandings amongst the Lithuanian and the Russian people. This is what needs to happen if the goal is to live in peace and prosperity, to avoid war. And since Lithuania cannot fight and win a war, Lithuania would probably be best served by joining those treaties that de-emphasize the weapons of war, such as cluster munitions and anti-mines. Take a leading position on, humanitarianism as opposed to militarism, because it's only through humanitarianism that Lithuania is going to be able to survive going forward. If Lithuania picks up the sword, one must remember the biblical adage, to live by the sword, you will die by the sword. And if that's the death Lithuania wants, so be it. Like I said, it's a sovereign state. It can choose any fate it so desires.
Yeah, you're right. Very right. For example, we're giving humanitarian help to Ukraine. That's fine. It's understandable. People are suffering. But when we're supporting or giving weapons, so it's different story. So you're inflating war more and more, so and it keeps pushing more casualties, more people that are suffering, and it's all destruction. So it's not good at all to do these things. So yeah, you're very right on this. Okay, so let's move forward. And Lithuanian European Commissioner for Space, we have one, and the war with Russia. So European Commissioner for Space, Lithuanian Andrius Kubilius, has informed that Russia may launch a military invasion of NATO and the European Union in 2028 instead of 2030 as planned. So he calls for European space shield. Member countries should, quote, unite our defense efforts in space, Andrius Kubilius says. So the question is, will Russia break into NATO even sooner?
I get frustrated when I hear language such as this because it comes from a place of extreme ignorance. Clearly, this individual knows nothing about war, nothing about how modern war is fought. If we take a look at the frontage that exists between Russia and the Baltic nations, because I do think we can safely say that if Russia were to go to war against the Baltic states, it wouldn't be against one Baltic state, but against all three simultaneously. And that Russia would likewise probably have to engage in at least a limited action against Poland to secure, the Kaliningrad frontage and also to prevent reinforcement out of the Polish corridor. So if we just look at that, the basic geographical problem and what it represents in terms of military resources that would have to be committed to such an action, and then try and transfer that onto comparable frontages in the Ukrainian conflict and look at the number of Russian military resources that would have to be committed to that task. What we would understand at that point in time is that the size of the Russian military committed to that area is not an offensive military. It's a defensive military. That Russia is neither organized, equipped, or prepared to engage in large-scale offensive military operations against the Baltic states or against Poland. And Russia is not positioning itself to do so. The only military expansion that's taken place in this region recently is in response to NATO expansion, meaning that Russia seeks to match NATO capabilities in case NATO decides to launch offensive operations against Belarus, the Kaliningrad enclave, or St. Petersburg. So I just think it's irresponsible in the extreme to talk about a Russian attack unless you have evidence of that manifesting itself. Right now, Russia is singularly focused on the conflict in Ukraine. It has dedicated almost 1 million men to this task, and its defense industry is almost completely absorbed by the needs to sustain and support this task. you can't speak of a war with NATO unless Russia talks about literally tripling the size of its military. This would require extensive lead time. It would not go undetected by NATO. And it's just something Russia's not interested in doing. One of the reasons why Russia is seeking to pursue the opportunity to bring an end to the conflict in Ukraine, albeit on terms acceptable to Russia, is because Russia recognizes that in the long term, having a war economy function, to the high degree that it's currently functioning is not good for the overall Russian economic health, and that Russia would like to get back to a sense of normalcy. Logically, the last thing Russia would be seeking to do is transition from a war with Ukraine to a war with NATO, because again, the idea of NATO is collective defense. If Russia were to launch an attack against the Baltic nations and against Poland, then Russia would need to be prepared to defend itself from NATO counter thrusts coming out of Romania, out of Hungary, out of Slovakia, out of the Czech Republic, out of Norway, out of Finland. This would mean a total mobilization. Russia's not doing that. Russia's not interested in that. So this is just fanciful, irresponsible thinking on the part of this Lithuanian individual, but it matches the fanciful, irresponsible thinking from NATO as a whole, where from the Secretary General Mark Rutte on down, you have NATO irresponsibly invoking the threat of a Russian military action against Europe without even going through how such a threat would manifest itself. Military professionals, true military professionals who know something about war, understand the mobilization requirements that would have to be met by Russia before they can even consider doing something like that, and recognize that these mobilization efforts would not go undetected and would take place over the course of years, which would give NATO a chance to respond, to build up. Russia's just not interested in that. Russia is focused on, normal economic based interactions with nations, a peaceful coexistence. The war in Ukraine was thrust upon Russia. Russia didn't seek to engage in this conflict of its own volition. It was compelled to engage in this conflict because of the actions of NATO, because of the actions of Ukraine, because of the actions of the United States. But it's not, seeking confrontation with the West. It's not even making an effort to prepare itself for the potential of offensive confrontation between the West. Russia right now has a military posture which outside of Ukraine is singularly defensive in nature. Russia is not preparing for an offensive, and any military professional who looks at the intelligence knows this. So one has to question the political motivations behind any intelligence assessment that says that Russia is preparing for an attack in 2030 or 2028 or at any time. Russia is not preparing for an attack against NATO, and every NATO member who has access to the real intelligence knows this to be the case.
Yeah, thank you. So far, Lithuania, maybe let's say 20 years or something like this, always were saying that Russia is a threat. Just keep telling people, that Russia is a threat and is going to attack us and so on and so on. But Russia itself, to be honest with you, I've never heard some news or politicians saying similar things to Lithuania, that Lithuania is some kind of aggressive. Of course, when they're telling that Russia is aggressive, so they have to respond somehow. For example, one Lithuanian former parliament member said that all Russians are terrorists. So, and they represent Lithuanian people, and it's to be honest sad that they doing this to our neighbor. Like, it's a whole big country, like multicultural country, which has different types of languages and so on and so on. And now all the Russians are terrorists. So that sounds kind of stupid, isn't it?
It's unnecessarily provocative in addition to being factually inaccurate. Russia is actually a nation that possesses one of the strongest anti-terrorist postures imaginable and has been active in the fight against both domestic terrorism and international terrorism. It's grossly irresponsible for language of this nature to be used by a neighbor of Russia when Lithuania knows the truth about, the reality of Russia. But, this is in keeping, Lithuania, the Lithuanian people have allowed themselves to be hijacked by a political and economic elite that are beholden to this notion of the continental hegemony of the European Union and the military dominance of NATO, and that Lithuania has fully aligned itself with those two concepts. But the fact is, the European economy is not doing well right now. I don't think Lithuania's economy is doing well. In fact, I think Lithuania just took itself off of the Russian power grid, and I don't know what the percentages are right now, but within 24 hours, 120% increase in the price of electricity, and that's going to go up and go higher with no chance, in the foreseeable future for it to stabilize and go down. How is this smart? Did Russia commit an act of economic terrorism against Lithuania when Lithuania, did this on its own volition? It's the same thing with Europe, allowing or remaining silent while the Nord Stream pipelines are sabotaged, and then wondering why your natural gas prices are so high that your businesses are shutting down. It's not Russia that did this. Russia's not a terrorist entity. But one could say that Lithuania, through its support to Ukraine, is a terrorist entity. I think one day we should get a full accounting of the totality of Lithuania's assistance to Ukraine to find if any of that assistance was used to facilitate actual acts of terror by Ukraine against Russians.
Yeah, thank you. So, and for example, since we were in this Brel electric stuff, that's called the Belarus, Russia, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, this ring. So there were any accidents. It was all okay. So we will see what's going to happen in the future. So, but all connections, let's say, are now off, and we will see. Okay, and the next one topic is Rheinmetall ammunition plant in Lithuania. In Lithuania, which is officially known as frontline zone with Russia, the German firm Rheinmetall, with a large North American shareholder like BlackRock, is about to start building a bomb factory which will supply bombs to whole Europe. The 340-hectare facility will address Lithuania's national security needs and contribute to European defense efforts by producing tens of thousands of 155mm artillery shells annually. The former Lithuanian Minister of National Defense said, "You live in the safest place in the terms of air defense." And the question, do you agree with this opinion of the former Lithuanian Minister of Defense when we're going to have a bomb ammunition plant?
Well, yeah, I don't know the specifics of Lithuania's air defense, infrastructure. I've studied it a little bit. I would dare say that it is neither as modern or as integrated as the air defense that has been provided for Ukraine, or the air defense that was installed in Israel to protect it from ballistic missiles and things of that nature. And as a result, if there is a conflict where Lithuania and Russia are paired off against one another, there is literally no air defense in Lithuania that can save it from the wrath of Russia. Russia possesses weapons that cannot be shot down by even the best air defenses, and Lithuania does not have the best air defenses. Lithuania's air defenses would be, one of the early targets of any Russian air campaign. So it would all be eliminated in the first 48 hours regardless. But even if it wasn't, the weapons that Lithuania possesses cannot shoot down Iskander missiles or any of the new hypersonic families of missiles. God forbid Russia uses an Oreshnik missile against Lithuania. There's no chance whatsoever of taking that system out. So this is the danger of playing games based upon inadequate assessments of both one's potential to engage in offensive military operations, but in this case also to defend oneself against military, offensive operations by others. Be rest assured that the Rheinmetall plant will rise to the top of Russia's targeting priorities in case of a conflict, and that this plant would be taken out at any time. Also understand that the declared production rate, tens of thousands of artillery shells per year, doesn't even provide for a week's worth of artillery shells in a high-intensity conflict such as what's taking place in Ukraine today. So all the artillery shells that would be produced by this facility can't match the need of 1 week's battle in the Russian-Ukraine conflict. So that these things have to be said so that people can put the importance of this Rheinmetall plant and its strategic significance in a proper perspective.
Yeah, you're right, and especially it's the facilities would be in the front line. So what's the first thing you should do? Just get rid of it. First task. So Lithuania leads NATO in spending. In 2025, Lithuania will continue to firmly pursue its main goal, strengthening security and defense. Ukraine's victory over Russian aggression and a stronger Euro-Atlantic relationship, said Kęstutis Budrys, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Senior Lithuanian military and political officials have agreed to invest 5 to 6% of GDP on defense spending over next 5 years, making it the first NATO country to make such commitment. Lithuania is sending a strong strategic message that is ready to use every means possible to ensure security of citizens and become global leader in defense spending, said Minister of Defense Šakalienė. So, question is Lithuanians 5 to 6% sufficient, or should Lithuania spend even more on NATO's common defense?
Again, it's an issue of a sovereign state to resolve internally. Lithuania could spend 15% and still not produce a military capable of defending Lithuanian soil in case of a war with Russia. So these are fake numbers because they won't result in any meaningful change. It's hard for Lithuania to sell itself as a leader. I mean, I know it wants to. It's very proud of its of who they are and things of that nature. I don't mean to denigrate that, but when you're speaking of military leadership, Lithuania would need to be able to put hundreds of thousands of heavily armed, well-trained troops into the field immediately in order for it to be able to contribute in a significant fashion to any joint NATO military response to Russian aggression or if they wanted to threaten Russia itself. Lithuania can't do that and is not in a position to do that. So this is literally a political maneuvering by the Lithuanians to make themselves appear to be more influential in the NATO structures than they actually are. But again, I just emphasize that unless Lithuania is a paradise on earth, meaning that, all roads are paved perfectly, all infrastructure is maintained perfectly, etc., bragging about spending 5 to 6% of your GDP on military resources that, if they're ever used, means the end of Lithuania, isn't really something I'd be bragging about. The more important thing would be for Lithuania to take a leadership role in promoting peace with Russia and seeking to divert as much of its resources into domestic infrastructure development, taking care of the domestic needs of the Lithuanian people. That would make for a stronger, more resilient Lithuania. But if you continue to play the militaristic game, again, it's a game that Lithuania will never win. And even if Lithuania is never called upon to use those armed forces, it's a waste of money because there is no scenario where the Lithuanian armed forces are going to come in as a decisive factor in any war between Russia and NATO. Lithuania, as I said, will cease to exist within a week, and its military will be totally destroyed. So there's no reason for Lithuania to invest this heavily in its military, except for, I guess, domestic political consumption, trying to impress themselves, and maybe confronting NATO with the fact that Lithuania deserves increased, levels of participation in the hierarchy of NATO because Lithuania has met certain benchmarks. But again, if I were the Lithuanians, I'd be more focused on how to live peacefully with the Russians than I would be about trying to impress my NATO partners with the level of spending that the nations put out for its military.
Yeah, you're very right, because in Lithuania, it's about 1/3 of population lives under poverty. So it's not enough, money for a big amount of people, to survive or live normally. So one thing. And another thing is that because of these economic and political, issues, starting from when we got independence, Lithuanian population declined it's reduced about 1 million. So an escalating war as well is not making people more happy or they don't feel living safer. But our leaders are escalating this more and more. Of course, some people believe in that, especially that in media they're not showing opposition or different media outlets who speaks truth, for example, like you or others. So it's just one line that where the Russia is gonna attack, we have to spend more and more, and we're leaders in in spending on defense. So that's the true reality. So, and maybe the last thing I would like to ask you for your thoughts. How you feel about recent Trump's conversation with Putin and the speech by U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, as Lithuanian political leaders lost their minds because it was completely opposite of Lithuanian positions that we talked before.
Again, I'll start by saying that Lithuania is a sovereign state, and Lithuania has every right to carry out foreign policy, national security policy, the way they see fit. But I would emphasize that Lithuania is not a meaningful actor in the European family of nations, and other than for those Americans who are willing to give Lithuania credence for propaganda purposes, Lithuania doesn't move the needle for any Americans. We don't care what you think or say or do because you simply don't matter to us. Unless I have a Lithuanian mother or parents, family history in Lithuania, there's nothing that goes on in Lithuania that any American really cares about. And we certainly don't care about what Lithuania thinks about the war in Ukraine. And it's not just the American people that feel this way. We now have a government that has made it clear that, Lithuania has made a decision that it is going to align itself exclusively with the European Union and the European aspect of NATO, insofar as that it wants to continue to pursue the conflict in Ukraine as the principal vehicle of confrontation with Russia. The United States has made it clear that that is not the direction that this administration is going to go. This administration has been in power for 3 weeks. It has, almost 4 years left. And so what we saw today is a reflection of this reality. Again, Lithuania is a sovereign state. You get to make your foreign policy the way you want, your national security policy the way you want. If I were advising the leadership of Lithuania, I would advise them to go into neutral gear at this point in time, to shut up about any aspect of NATO spending, of support to Ukraine, anything. You don't have to jump in with the United States, but my advice would be to shut up, because you're not taking a leadership position in confronting the United States, because you don't matter. Therefore, we don't care what you think. But if you irritate us, there could be repercussions. And those repercussions could be severe. Lithuania is not in a position to take on the United States of America in an economic trade war, for instance. Trump's favorite retaliatory measure is tariffs. Does Lithuania want tariffs imposed on it? The other thing is, I don't know the Lithuanian people. I would imagine they're like people anywhere else in the world. Insofar as they want peace, they'd like to live with stability. They want a better future for their children. They want opportunities. But if you believe all that, and yet you support a conflict in Ukraine, which has destroyed a nation with no hope of achieving any of the stated objectives, Ukraine will not be returned to its 2014 borders. Russia will not be strategically defeated. None of this is going to happen. And yet for Lithuania to continue to say, no, this is the direction we want to go, knowing that continuing the war in Ukraine will not change the ultimate outcome. Russia will not be defeated, but you will be condemning tens, if not hundreds of thousands of additional Ukrainian men to death or worse. How can you, with full conscience, support this kind of policy? Do Lithuanians even look in the mirror in the morning and ask themselves, am I proud of who I am and what I do and what I support and what I believe in? And I can't imagine, if you continue to support this conflict in Ukraine, that the answer of, am I proud of the person looking back at me? That can't be a yes. It has to be a no, a shameful no. The United States is seeking an end to this conflict. That's the strategic directive that the United States is heading. And it's into a conflict that embraces the notion of Russian reality, not a surrender to Russia, not succumbing to the demands of Vladimir Putin, but a recognition that there are realities on the ground that have been bought and paid for by the Russians with the blood of Russian soldiers that will never be compromised on at all. The other reality is that Russia is winning, and that there's nothing that can be done to turn that around, to change that trajectory. And so if you're the United States and you're dealing with your policy formulations from a position of reality, which Donald Trump is, then certain things become crystal clear, such as Ukraine will never be a member of NATO, such as Russia will get all of the territories that it has already absorbed into the Russian Federation, through the rule of law. This means not only Crimea, but also Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk in their totality. This is a reality that Lithuania will have to deal with and learn to deal with. It's not going to be altered. The other reality is that the United States is not going to reinforce its position in NATO. In fact, just the opposite. We're looking to disengage from NATO, to withdraw 20,000 troops. I don't know where you think you're going to get reinforcements from in any conflict with Russia, but it's not going to be from the United States of America. We're withdrawing. We're de-emphasizing the military solutions. We're emphasizing the potential for political compromises to improve relations. So, these are the harsh truths. So the other harsh truth is that Ukraine will never be a member of NATO, ever. It just isn't going to happen. I know that's something that Lithuania was hoping would occur, but it's not going to occur. This is the new reality. We are not going to be sending significant military supplies to Ukraine. If Europe, meaning Lithuania, wants to continue to underwrite this war, it will do so free of the assistance that had been previously provided by the United States. These are realities that people have to deal with. The other reality is that the United States is not looking to sustain a regime change policy against Russia, where we view Vladimir Putin as, an evil dictator who must be removed. Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump had a very productive 90-minute phone conversation where they not only talked about getting together to craft a peace formulation for the situation in Ukraine, but also to invite each other to their respective capitals. State visits. This is a completely different direction than Lithuania and Lithuanian leaders have been articulating they favor. Lithuania is going to have to adapt to the American reality, or else Lithuania will find itself on the wrong side of history when it comes to a post-Ukrainian conflict Europe.
Thank you, Scott, for your very nice and good insights, your thoughts on these issues. And we hope we're going to see you sometime in the future, and we're going to have some chats as well, okay?
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure to talk to you and your audience.